Hi, this is a brief tutorial to discuss using the cloning and healing tools in Photoshop. Now, for my example here, I'm going to show you how to clone out a leash, but the same basics apply really for any sort of cloning that you might do to remove a distracting element from your scene. Now, of course, if you are a photojournalist or a documentary photographer, it's not appropriate to remove things from your photograph. But pretty much for everybody else, it comes down to an aesthetic decision. And if it is something that's helping the image, then of course leave it in. But if it's not helping, then chances are it might be detracting a little bit, and you should pull it out. Now, for this particular image, this was photographed for a dog rescue, and because of that, the dog wasn't really somebody I knew, and I needed to keep it on a leash. Now, having a leash kind of come out, and especially when the dog's kind of pulling at it, might be giving the wrong message to potential adopters. Having a dog pulling at the leash shows potential bad manners. And besides that, especially this kind of a leash where it just kind of loops around the pet, it really doesn't seem like it's the kind of leash where where somebody can envision this dog being somebody's pet. It really seems much more of a temporary sort of thing, like you see at a vet or at an adoption agency. So that's another reason why I like to remove it. Finally, you can also see that when I shot this, I used flash, and even though it was a nice, bright and sunny evening, having a little bit of fill flash really makes a big difference. Had I not done that, the dog here would have been relatively silhouetted against the background because he was backlit. And more important than that, I used flash, but I used a diffused flash. I used a speed light, and I used a what's called a Gary Fong diffuser on it. It makes for a really nice quality of light rather than just the straight out of the speed light flash or even an on-camera flash, which is a really direct and hard light source. Using a diffuser really makes the quality of light much nicer. And the way I photographed them, you wouldn't really see it here, but if there was a wall or something behind them, you would see a really hard shadow behind him had I not used a diffuser, and a diffuser would really help to eliminate that, if not altogether, at least really minimize it. Because I used the flash, you can see there are a couple little bugs that are flying around, so these are the kind of things that I clone out too. This is the kind of edit that you really need to do in Photoshop. Lightroom has a healing tool and a cloning tool, but to say that it's a good tool for this would really be overselling the capabilities of that particular tool. Anytime that you have areas where you have overlap between texture and color, Lightroom just doesn't do a good job with that at all. And so Photoshop's really the tool to go. Now, a couple of things. First of all, you can say open this as a smart object. And whether you use a smart object or just have it as a regular background, my advice here is the same. Always do your edits on a new layer. So click on the new layer button. And the reason that you do this is because it allows you to go back and change your edits later on. And if you realize, and chances are at some point, and probably pretty frequently, you're going to have some errant marks with your mouse, or you realize that here I'm in at 25%, and I think that maybe it looks pretty good, but then if I had zoomed in at 100%, maybe I'd realize I introduced a little bit of noise. Having it on its own layer allows me to erase mistakes and or use a layer mask to cover up some of that, and it allows you a better blending option. Always do these kind of edits on its own layer. In terms of the healing brush, now stamp brush or the clone brush, we'll start with that. First of all, when you use that, you want your mouse to be or excuse me, your cursor to be maybe just a little bigger than what you're working on, so you can see that I've got that. And of course that little orange is just so that you can see where my cursor is. That's not actually a part of Photoshop. In order to use that, you need to sample, and if you hold down your Alt key and then click, now when I use my mouse you can see that a little plus sign is showing you where it's sampling from. Now you can see that this does a pretty decent job, and here we're removing it. When you're using the stamp, clone stamp, what you're doing is using a 100% copy. So this pixel is exactly the same as this pixel now because that's where it's sampled from. You can see here that I have my opacity and flow both at 100%. I typically will do a gross edit here with these at 100%, and then I'll dial these back to maybe about 20% each, and that will give me a much more feathered effect. Now just to show you what that looks like, had I been using a mouse, then this would be completely 100% green, just in the same way that the grass was. But I'm using a Wacom tablet, which is pressure sensitive, so the harder I press down, the more, and I'll show you here, turn my thing back on. Here I'll do a really hard press and you'll be able to see what that looks like. So here you can see pushing really hard does that, whereas doing a light one will look more like this. That's one of the big benefits of using a Wacom tablet. In any case, I don't really want those, so I'm going to erase them, and I'm just using the eraser tool here. And see, that's what the layer one, having this on an empty layer is all about. Had I done this directly on my background layer, then I'd be erasing pixels here and just have an empty space. So here we went over the eraser, the clone stamp, the healing brush. Now the default here is spot healing brush, and when you do that, what it's going to do, and I'm going to make my cursor a little bigger here, is it's going to sample pixels that are around it and just kind of blend all by itself. So you can see when you have a relatively similar background, it's going to do a really nice job. When you have something that's maybe got a little bit of variety, it might do a good job like it does there, but then look what happens when I go down here. It's not quite a perfect kind of edit. So what we're going to do instead is use the healing brush tool, and like the clone stamp, the healing brush tool requires that you sample an area first. So we click with the Alt key and then we draw, and you can see that I'm sampling from a very specific area, and that will allow more control over the way that you use these tools. And one of the things I'd like you to do is sample from multiple areas in order to get a better overall effect. Now let me just go and I'll knock out these little bugs quick. And you can see I'm sampling a couple different areas until I like the way it looks. That's a pretty typical kind of edit, and I'm also going pretty quick here just for the sake of the tutorial. The more detailed the edit, the slower you're going to want to go. Once you get close to where you're going to have some blending, then you're going to want to zoom in at 100%. And the way that this is best done is click right on a border here. So click on that border and try to blend in pretty good. And you'll see we get a pretty good effect just by going like that. I went a little too far, so I'm going to have to fix that. But overall, I think everything looks pretty good. To show you what it would look like if I did it differently, I'm going to start a new layer here, and here I'll sample up here. And you can see how it just makes a big blend of color, and it's not nearly as neat as when I sampled from right on the border. Here I introduced texture, I introduced color, and overall the edit is much, much cleaner. Now, of course, the trick is you can't have any little areas of overlap like that, and so you need to make sure that you have a nice edit overall. So it looks nice and smooth, and that looks much more natural. Now, the thing that you gotta be careful of is repeating pattern. So here, if you look at this area here, I've got a short fur and a long fur. Okay, now I've got another one here, I've got another one here, so I'm getting a repeating pattern. And so that's one of the telltale signs that you are doing some of this work here in Photoshop. The way that you would fix that then is then go back and sample from different areas and just kind of tweak it and modify it. Of course, you need to deselect. So now you can see, whoops. Now you can see I made one little change, and we've made that a little better. And now maybe I'm going to want to go back and use the clone tool and maybe clean it up a little bit and feather it a little bit. So again, I'm going to move the opacity and flow down to about 20% and just kind of paint in a little bit some of the color and help to smooth this area out. And again, sampling from different areas is going to give you a better overall effect. So here you can see two different ways to do it. So I'll turn that one off. And you can see I didn't do a really very smooth edit here, so now I'm going to build this area up a little bit. Go back to the healing brush. Yeah, I think I made that a little bit worse. So you can see how playing with this a little bit, going back and forth, you're going to give yourself an overall good effect. Here, maybe I'll just fill this area in a little bit. So once you get that done, then you're going to want to come back in here and do the neck. And again, you want to be zoomed in at 100% to do this kind of thing. Maybe we'll sample from here. Just kind of extend that a little bit. And again, multiple clicks is the way to go. Don't try to do this all in one smooth movement because it's just not going to work as well. That's pretty much the technique, and it doesn't matter what you're working on. The more texture you have, of course, the more complicated it's going to be, but the basics here are all the same. So, you know, if I had, you know, maybe a strand of grass that was on the dog, I could clone that out the exact same way. If it was telephone lines in a landscape, exact same techniques. Definitely use Photoshop for these kind of edits. It's so much easier, so much more powerful. And especially starting with version CS5 and improved in CS6, they had what they call the content aware cloning, and that's going to makes everything so much easier than it used to be. These are really very manageable tools for you to use, and they do a much better job than Lightroom. Let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing your edits.